time for the second row in our quilt along. We are going to sew part 11 out of the box. Hi there and welcome to a new video in the Sugaridoo Bernina quilt along. My name is Irene and today we're going to make the 11th row, well the second row, but part 11 of our quilt along, and this is what we will be making. This row is called out of the box because those stripes kind of go out of what could have been a box. So that is the design and the row and the name for this row. I think it's a fun row. You can play with doing some improv or making it all the same width. So I played with the width of my stripes. So those strips are different width and therefore it's a little random, so improved. But you can do whatever you want inside these squares. So feel free to play with it. Can't wait to see what you will be making. I had lots of fun making this one. It's a lovely row to make and I can't wait to see what you will do with it. Let's get started. Let's go over our materials first. So what we need in this row is main fabric. We're going to use the Camellia pink fabric if you're making the rainbow quilt. My accent fabric, background fabric, inch rulers, either a long one or a short one. I've already cut some strips from the outside of the block, so the half box of the out of the box block. So this is what we will frame the diagonal lines with, and this will go in between the blocks. Of course, a rotary cutter, a cutting mat, ironing board and sewing machine. That's all we need in this row. So I already cut the strips for the outer part of the block. Let me just set that aside for now. And I have some scraps left over from that, which I might use for the directional and diagonal parts. And then I am left with this piece of fabric. So this piece has a width of fabric, so it's folded double, and it is, well, it's over 12 inches high. We are going to make the diagonal lines with this. And the diagonal part is going to be 6 by 6 inches. And to make that, let me see if I can show it to you on my cutting mat. So from here to here we have 6 inches. So I'll just put a piece of fabric over there. So this is 6 inches. This is how big our inside part of the block should be. And then we want to make diagonal lines. So to cover the whole diagonal line and have a little bit room to spare, we need strips that are about 11 inches long. So from here to there, that's 11 inches. So what you can do with your width of fabric is cut it in 4 pieces. So when you cut it in 4 pieces, this should be, yes, this is 11 inches. So when you divide it in 4 pieces, you will have 11 inches wide, and from that we will cut strips. So no need to cut all your fabric up just yet. Just measure 11 inches. There we go. 11 inches, that is over here. And we'll put this aside. So from this we will cut strips, and the pink strips will be between 1 and 1.5 inch, and your background fabric, so the light gray, is going to be between 1 1/4 and 1 3/4. So if you go for the improv option, you want to cut strips with varying width. So I'll cut a few of 1 inch, and I'll cut a few of 1 1/4, cut a few of 1 1/2, and then I'll just mix them up and have a kind of a random pattern in there. If you want to go less improv, you can make all these strips the same width. So you could go, for example, for this 1 1/4 or 1 1/2, and then make them all the same width. And if you're a little bit more experienced quilter and you want to go with wavy lines here, be my guest, that's completely okay. So if you go with wavy lines and assemble diagonal row like that, that's also fine. I'm not going to show that in this video. I'm just going to do varying width between 1 and 1 1/2 inch. So let me cut 2 more of 1 inch. Well, how wide is this one? That's 1 1/4. So here you have pink strips of fabric, and I'm going to do the same with my background fabric. And I'll put this aside to cut up later. And why I'm doing that and not cutting everything at once is because with the other improv row I read some comments that people were left with strips of fabric, and this way you'll just only cut what you need. So from this background you're going to cut strips of 1 1/4 inch, 1 1/2 inch, and 1 3/4 inch, varying that in width. So the background is going to be a little bit wider than my main fabric. But if you want to choose to mix that up and make the background smaller or thinner than your main fabric, perfectly fine to do that. There we go. So here we have some strips, and I'm just going to show you first how to assemble those. Here on my cutting mat I have a diagonal line of 45 degrees. So if you have a cutting mat, look for a line like this, and if you don't have one, you can just make with like washi tape or painter's tape. You can mark the diagonal line, because that is what we want to follow with our strips. I'm just going to pick my place my ruler here for reference. And what I'm going to do is keep this line in mind, and here I have my ruler. So 6 inches is going to be over here. I'm going to mark it with a little piece of fabric so I know where it is. So it is from there to here. So this is 6 inches. So that is what we want to cover. So that is from this white line to this white line. And what you then want to do is to make sure that your points of your strip are above and below that line. So you don't want to sew your strip like this, because then you will miss a little piece of fabric over there. So you want to make sure that you're following this diagonal line and have your points above and below those lines. So that one is fine, and then I'm going to put this one next to it. But you have to keep in mind that when you line them up like so, and you will then fold it open, you will have a chance. Let me see if I can show it to you. This one turns out fine because it's a very thin strip. But let's see what happens when we use a wider strip and we would just sew them together lining them out and then opening it up. You can see that the corner of this strip right now is almost touching our upper limit, so to say. So what you want to do is to place your strip a little bit higher than the first one. So I'm not going to line them up exactly, but I'm just going to place it a little bit higher. And to see that when I fold it open, that those points are not going to be, so this point in particular is not going to be below this line. I really hope that makes a little bit of sense. So we want to go for a block that is going to be 6 by 6, and we're going to first sew all these strips together and cut squares from that. And to get nice squares, we need to have at least this, between these lines, we need to assemble a long strip of fabric. So we're going to follow this 45-degree angle line, and we're not going to assemble the strips placing them right on top of each other, but you're going to move your strip a little bit so that it will fit the upper and lower limit that we've set after you've sewn it and when you fold it open. Okay, I'm just going to sew it and iron it and show you what it looks like afterwards. So on this side you can see I've not lined it up, but I've moved it a little bit to the top. There we go, I've sewn this one together. Now I'm going to finger press it. And press it with my iron. There we go, all sewn and pressed. And now I can show you a little bit better what I'm aiming for. So here you see these triangles, and those triangles, especially this dip, should stay above our line over here. And the same on this side. So you will see here triangles, and those points, especially this point, the highest point here and the lowest point here, this one should stay below this line. So that is what we're aiming for. And what you can do now is just place it back on your mat and again line up with that 45-degree angle line and make sure that this point is above here and this point is below here. That looks good. So now we're going to take another strip of gray fabric and make sure that it's going to be assembled something like that. So this is also why you take at least 11 inches long strips, because then you have some wiggle room, and we all love wiggle room to don't have to make it too precise. So I'm going to place it something like this, I think. Flip it over. And there we go. Fold it open, finger press, and as you can see here, this is a less of a difference in lining up than this one, and that is because the thinner your strip is, the less you have to shift it. See if we still are doing a good job. Yes, these points are all above our line and these points are all below our line. That is going great. Okay, so lining it up, taking another piece of fabric and placing this something like that, and then this one is going to end up like this. So I'll just flip it over and sew it together. And I'm using just normal stitch length and a 1/4 inch seam. And when you're sewing more and more strips together, you can see if there's maybe a tendency that it goes lower or higher, and then you can adjust it a little bit as you go. But for now, it all seems to go fine. So yeah, let's continue this way, adding strips and strips. You don't need to sew everything together until it's 48 inches long, because that is going to be a pretty big bulk of fabric. So it is okay to start cutting already. I've sewn now until all my background strips are used, so I just have a few of my main fabric left, so I need to cut more background. But before I'm going to do that, I'm going to cut up, I guess, the first 2 blocks from this, because this fabric is already ready. So let me show you how to do that. What we want is pieces of 6 by 6 inch. So let me just use my ruler, which is 6 inches wide, and check where I can place it so that I can cut 6 by 6 inches. There we have it. So I can now just trim this off and cut it into a 6 by 6 inch block. Finding my 6 inch line over here, having everything lined up over there. This corner of the ruler is inside of the fabric. There we go. Lining up my 6 inch over here and over here, and then the final cut. So there I have my first of 8 blocks of 6 by 6 inch. So I'm just going to cut, I guess, 1 more. Yeah, and then I need to continue adding strips. So this really helps with not having too large of a piece of fabric to add strips to. There we go. That is already 2 of our blocks done. How cool is that? Really like it. This would also be a very fun quilt to make a whole design with all these improv lines. Oh well, first make a row for this quilt, right? So continue adding strips to here and cutting it off whenever you have 6 inches finished. You can just cut it off. Oops, almost forgot to add in our accent fabric. So you can add in 1 or 2 of the strips as accent fabric, or make a lot of accent fabric, just play with it. But I'm going to add 1 strip of accent fabric in there, and then when it's incorporated in the blocks, I'm just going to see in the row where I'm going to place it. when you're going to cut your blocks, it's a good idea to check on your ruler if these lines are still 45 degrees. So you can just place your line following the seam between two strips and then check if that is still straight. So in this case I line up my 45-degree angle over here, and then I cut on this side, and then I can see on the other side there is a small snippet over here that I need to cut off. So it's going to tilt slightly or deform slightly when you're sewing, because yeah, this is just really easy to deform. When you pull like this, there's a little bit of stretch on the bias, so it's a good idea to, every other block that you cut, just check your 45-degree angle on your fabric. I'm almost there, I guess. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Only one to go, so almost done. I have now completed 8 of these blocks. So 8 blocks with diagonal lines, mixed background and main fabric, and also had 1 strip of accent fabric which turned up into 2 of the blocks. So yeah, now we're going to do a more traditional kind of piecing, log gabbing. So we're going to add strips to the sides of the block to make this. So we have cut 4 strips. 1 is going to go over here, and 1 over here, and then 1 over here, and then 1 over there. To sew that, just pay attention to your 1/4" seam, and I think you're then just all good to go when you've cut your strips to sew them. I am going to film it because we have a lot of those seams on the back, and I'll just show you how I take it slow and sew those, so you don't have your seams bulking up at the back of your block. Yeah, what else to say? The diagonal lines I'm pointing towards the border, but that's the way I chose. You can also flip it and play with that. What I'm going to do is place this block in a row like so and like so. So I'm going to alternate this and this, but you're free to mix it up all the way or make them all pointing in the same direction in your whole row. You can play with that. But first, let's turn these squares into these blocks. So here we have a little block, and I want to add the shortest of the gray strips to it. Guess that's this one. Yep, that is exactly as wide as the block, so this is a 6-inch strip. And as you can see from the block over here, I'm first going to add it to this side and then to the top. So here I'm going to place it on this side and then sew it. So what you could do is sew it like this from the top, because your seams then are pointing down, so they're not going to move in any way. If you want to have side on your seams while you're sewing, you can sew it like this, but what will happen then is that, at least at my foot, that this point of the foot will catch this seam and flip it over while I'm sewing. So if you're sewing like this, on every seam you can just lift your foot, flatten the seam below it, and continue sewing. But when you sew it like this, you can count on it that the seams will stay flat because they are pointing in this direction. So I'm just going to try it like this and see how that goes. I'm using my Bernina 97D patchwork foot, quilting foot, and that has a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And this is a really handy guide bar that comes with it. So when I have my fabric against this one, it's a 1/4 inch. I think that went very well. Yeah, that's nice. All the seams are flat. No seams were flipped during flipped or folded during sewing this. So now I'm going to finger press it open and give it a press. So that is the strip on one side. Now I need to add a strip on this side as well. For that you're going to take the longer strip, and that is going to go over here. So again, I'm just going to check the seams on the back, in which direction they are pointing. They are pointing in this direction. So it's safe to just place it like this. Make sure that it's all aligned with the side of the block. And the beginning of the end are aligned. There we go. And then I can just sew it. Looks good. And also on the back, that looks fine. Now it's time to do the pink border. So for that I'm going to take the shorter pink strip, this one, and I'm going to place it next to the first background strip that I've sewn. So this one was sewn first and then this one. So this pink strip is also going to be next to the first background strip. And sew it. That looks perfect. Pressed it, and now it's time for the final strip on this block. And that goes on this side. So I'll just line it up over here. And this seam is pointing in this direction. So I'll just flip it over and sew it like this. And then I don't have any risk of that seam flipping in the other direction while I'm sewing. Don't think that would really happen with such a straight seam, but it doesn't really matter which side you will have up during sewing. Yay! And there is my second block finished. So there we have 2 blocks done, and in my row they are going to be like this. So I'm going to put these strips in between, like so, and then sew them together into one row, alternating the direction of the block. So yeah, that's what we're going for. Let's finish also these blocks. All my blocks are done. Oh, look-see, there they are. Now they need to be sewn together into one row. And this row I'm going to start with 1 block and then do the sashing and then a block, sashing block, and end with a block. So I am going to start with a block like this and then rotate it, and the next block is going to be like this. So it's going to be alternating this and this this, and this. But as I said before, you can alternate it in any direction that you want. Yeah, so let's sew those together and then our row is done. Oh, and the accent blocks, in the illustration of the quilt I have only one accent piece. Here I have two, but I'm going to put them close to the end, close to the right side of the row. So I guess it's going to be position 6 and 7 in the row. Yeah, so 6 and 7 from the left. So first 5 blocks without accent, and then my 2 blocks with accent, and then 1 more block without. Normally I like to chain piece everything, but since this is going to alternate, I don't want to mess it up, so I'm just going to sew it block by block. Ta-ta-ta-ta! There it is. It's done. It's done. Another row. The final to last. Is it final to last? One to last? Penultimate? I don't know what the word in English is. Well, the 11th row of this quilt along. Only one more row to go after this one. And then we can start assembling the quilt. So super exciting. So there we have it. Let me show you. Let me see if I can show you the whole row in the frame. There it is, row 11 out of the box. I hope you had a lot of fun sewing this row together and making it in your own style, going a little bit improv or making it all the same blocks. I really liked it. I think it's a fun process of kind of making your own fabrics by sewing those strips together and then kind of cutting it up again. So yeah, there we have it, out of the box. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you again in 4 weeks for the final row of our Sugaridoo Bernina quilt along. Bye!